moment.
Got it. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
With that, let's get to my selection, and that is Monsoon Wedding. First, some information about the film. Monsoon Wedding was released in 2001. It was written by Sabrina Dewan and directed by Mira Nair. It stars, and I am sure I'm going to get a lot of these names wrong, Nasiruddin Shah, Lalette Dubey, Shefali Shah, Vasundhara Das, Vijay Raz, Tilatama Shome, Parvin Dabas, Rajat Kapoor, Neha Dubey, and Kamaya Kidwai. The basic premise revolves around an arranged wedding that takes place in New Delhi, an event complicated by the bride still not over an affair with her boss at a television studio, a lovesick event planner, money issues, a dodgy brother-in-law, the arrival of relatives from all over the world, as well as some ill-timed rain. So what do you think of the pairing of the two films?
Well, it's interesting because right off the top, we talked about slick, studio-produced, box office-looking movies versus a true indie art house film coming from an Indian director. People understand there's Bollywood films. It took me years to even understand what a huge success Bollywood is. Their film industry and their stars are bigger than here. But I think the relationship stuff is similar in terms of the conflicts of parents and the kids and relationships. They have very intertwined themes, but in terms of filmmaking, looking at the difference in the budgets. As an actor myself, I'm always drawn to more of these indie films. I call it actors sitting and having real dialogue and talking. I like that the writer-creators was compared to Robert Altman at one time I was reading, and I love the Robert Altman films as well because you just feel like you're a voyeur watching a family. This reminds me similar to last year's big Korean movie,
Parasite.
Something about the storytelling of it. But Monsoon Wedding, we don't have arranged marriages so much, but similarities mainly for me were in the relationship, the conflicts within the relationships, and there was comedy as well.
What about you, Ralph?
It's an interesting pairing because Monsoon Wedding culturally focuses more on family tradition and family relationships, whereas Bridesmaids, that was really only touched on with Jill Clayburgh and Kristen Wiig's character. In terms of comparison, in a general fashion, it's groups of people trying to organize a wedding, coming up with different obstacles along the way. But I feel that the Monsoon Wedding really highlighted how family will do anything for each other, no matter what disparity or no matter what limitations they have. The pairings of both movies illustrate that no matter what happens, we are going to get through this. I know with Bridesmaid, we feel, as you said, reading between the lines, these friends will never see each other. But there was some closure with the friendship in Bridesmaids. I feel that there was the same kind of closure in Monsoon Wedding as well.
When did you first see the film?
When you first invited us to do the show, I rented it shortly thereafter. I did not know of the film before you had invited us to do your show.
I had seen it originally 2002 or 3, I forgot. And then I rewatched it when I knew we were going to do this. Remember how much I liked it at the time? I have this thing where I rarely watch a movie twice. I just like to remember a movie when I see it the first time. But it's really stupid of me because every time I will go back and watch something again, I see so many other moments. But what I say a film can really stand to the testament of time is, does it hold up? I feel like this story is universal. It just happens to be Indian. Mm-hmm. But seeing it the second time, I actually think it did not even get the justice that it should have gotten the first time. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people thought there was going to be subtitles. 18 years ago, we hadn't quite fallen victim to it's got to be a Marvel movie. We were still going to see movies that had actual relationships and dialogue.
Ralph, what did you think about the film upon seeing it?
It's interesting because I liked the earthiness of the movie. Even though it's an Indian-based movie, the themes are universal of finding true love and wanting to be accepted. It's so ordinary to say that, but what I liked about the film is the acceptance of family for the young boy who was clearly not interested in any of this and he wanted to be a dancer. They accepted that, even though he was a little bit belligerent to the parents, I thought. A smart aleck. It highlighted for me the way men seek women. But the lead woman, the woman who was getting married, once again, I liked what her objectives were and what she wanted, which was true love.
And also, this is a musical. It almost seems sometimes like a Hollywood musical. I'm really forgetting to say one of my favorite characters is the father. The way the father has to be in that holding pattern of how do I stick to culture, but also have my daughter still love me kind of thing, which I think is universal. In general, weddings can be a nightmare. But it was so whimsical. I guess that's the word I'm looking at. And suddenly, as I'm talking about it, it's reminding me a little bit of Crazy Rich Asians, minus the big budget.
What are some of your favorite scenes in the movie?
There was this one heavy-set relative woman, and when they're sitting around, I don't know if it was a campfire, but they're sitting in a group situation. I really was turned on to her because she was buoyant and jovial. She helped move the storyline along. She kept things buoyant and lighthearted. This wasn't my favorite scene, but because, as we mentioned before, my thing about bathrooms, the scene where the event planner comes home to take a shower, the situation that their bathroom was in, that this is where he used to clean himself. And then he doesn't really actually clean himself. He just takes off his clothes to his underwear, splashes some water on his face, and then goes out on the deck. It's a scene that stuck in my head.
He's a great character. He's this guy who was never remotely interested romantically in women. And all of a sudden, he falls head over heels in love with someone. He has no idea what's happening to him. He doesn't know why he feels this way or where it's coming from. And you both feel very sorry for him while at the same time.
Right.
It's great that he's falling in love.
That's what makes it an interesting pairing in the sense of Kristen Wiig's character wasn't in love. She wished she had been in love. She sees her best friend fulfilling all those fantasies that she has, and now she wants that as well. And it's the same for this event planner. In one scene, he's hanging out with the guys, and they're eating whatever food that is. He feels this tingling. And once again, Howard, it's that theme of wanting to be included.
There's also that scene when they finally come clean about their past, be honest about what's really happened. I love that scene. And then I'm trying to remember, there was a scene where there's all the marigold flowers.
Yes.
Right? And he...
The event planner, Doobie.
Again, Ralph and I are both drawn to this character. But when he has that scene where he falls to his knees and there's all the marigolds, he's giving his adoration for the lady, Alice. And again, the father, I keep going back to the father. He tries to do the right thing.
He's very much reminiscent in many ways of Spencer Tracy in Father of the Bride with these problems, money problems. He's trying to get it all done. He has a son who's obviously gay and he doesn't really want to admit it and keeps trying to toughen him up. And then he has to make that major decision at the end to kick his brother-in-law out of the house.
You're right. The dignity that he tried to maintain with his culture. And you're right. They really did. You bring in the gay son, which culturally that was never well accepted in the Indian culture. I don't think it still is. I think it's probably getting better. But just like you said, these are universal themes that you could replace the Indian family with an Asian family, German family. Have you followed the writer-director's career?
The writer mainly has remained in India. Mira Nair wanted to be not just an Indian filmmaker. She grew up in India, but she went to school in the U.S., and she wanted to stay in the U.S. to make films. I've only seen one other film of hers, and that was The Namesake, which I hated. I thought it was just an awful movie. But I haven't many others of hers because they never got really enthusiastic responses from the critics. For me, and this is off the top of my head, I think she's trying to be too commercial.
Right.
One of her big movies was the Amelia Earhart movie with Hilary Swank.
Oh, was that hers? I didn't realize that.
Okay. Crashed and burned.
No pun intended, yeah.
And I'm thinking, why would you ever want to make this big studio film about Amelia Earhart in the first place? But she makes all sorts of films. She makes films that do not have Indian backgrounds at all, sort of like Ang Lee.
Well, she did the Mississippi Masala, right?
Right.
And that was almost years before.
She did Kama Sutra before this one. I should get into her more, but this was the one that she's most respected for, most known.
Let me ask you, tell us what made you pick this movie.
Well, if I was honest, it was my second pick.
Okay.
My original pick, The Contract, which is a Polish movie by Christoph Zanussi that I saw back in the 70s, but it wasn't available. It was also about the lead up to a wedding as well. So when I couldn't get that, then I went for Monsoon Wedding. I love Monsoon Wedding. It's one of my favorite films of that year for many reasons, a lot of the reasons why you say. It's a wonderful ensemble piece. You do bring up Robert Altman. I'm not as big a fan of Robert Altman as other people are, but this is a Robert Altman type movie. There's lots of characters, and they're all very interesting. All have their stories and their through lines. Two of my favorite scenes are the big music numbers.
Right.
The one where the son bows out at the last minute because his father's been criticizing him about being too effeminate. So he decides not to do the dance number, but they have the dance number anyway, and then other people join in. And that was wonderful. When people use music like that in a movie and often have people dancing, and it's amazing how that can just raise you up to a higher level.
That's why I like the aunt, the jovial one. I loved her.
Yeah, she joined in. And then at the very end, when they also have sort of a musical number and you hear it in the background and it's raining, but nobody's letting the rain get in the way.
It was like another character, but
right.
Well, but it rains so much.
Right. It reminded me of a cleansing. It's wild abandon now. It's the gods creating it, and there's no control you have over it except to succumb and love it, embrace it. So that's what makes the title of the movie. Whereas in Los Angeles, that would happen, and everybody would be devastated and run indoors,
and be
cursing.
I thought exactly the same thing. If they had had this sort of rainstorm in the U.S. during a wedding, people would say, the wedding's ruined. But in this film, it is like a cleansing. They've all accepted it. They're all letting go of their conflicts. They're saying yes to life, yes to the future.
I just realized when you said in your second choice, my second choice was going to be My Big Fat Greek Wedding, because that's the other movie that I laughed out loud.
It's a very funny movie.
I don't know what I've got this wedding thing on my mind.
Mira Nair said that she made the movie as a combination of Bollywood and American independent approach to filmmaking. It was a response to Bollywood films. She said that after seeing a 4-hour Bollywood wedding movie, she was talking about it and she said, let's make a realistic family movie, one that actually shows you what it is really like. Have you ever seen a Bollywood movie?
I've only seen clips of them. I've never sat down and watched an entire Bollywood film. Have you, Ralph?
For me, I haven't seen a Bollywood film, but I did a play, Ken Rote's play, Jasper. We have a whole Bollywood number in the musical, but I accepted to do this Bollywood number. There are like 25 of us on stage, and there is so much going on, so colorful. I had the time of my life. That's my experience with Bollywood.
I've only seen a few of them. If you see the good ones, of course, they can be absolutely wonderful. They are like 4 hours long. There is an intermission to them. They're highly melodramatic. They're highly funny. They have a lot of musical numbers to them. They tend to deal often with a very, very serious issue at the same time. My favorite is perhaps Three Idiots, which is about a group of people going to college in the first half and then meeting up again in the second half. And what inspired the movie is that India has the highest number of college students committing suicide in the world. At the same time, it's still a very funny movie. It's a very enjoyable movie. They have some wonderful musical numbers. I once took a friend to see a Bollywood film at the Lakma. During intermission, he came to me and said, you really get a bang for your buck in a Bollywood film. And you do. You get everything in the kitchen sink. But they are the epitome of pop culture in India. They're not considered as serious when it comes to filmmaking as other filmmakers are, like Sanyat Ray or this movie, which is a combination of Bollywood because there are Bollywood scenes with the musical numbers, but it's a much more American independent approach to filmmaking. So it's even much more character focused and more focused on reality. Bollywood films can get really outrageous.
I have a friend, Malik Pancholi. He's Indian. We had a discussion about Bollywood films one day, and he said, well, just take a Spanish telenovela on the big screen with music.
Yes.
That's what you have. Throw in a lot of music and dancing.
Make it 4 hours long with an intermission.
Can you imagine American, with our limited attention span, ADD and...
This in a way might be perfect for ADD because you have a comedy scene, then a drama scene, then a musical number, then a drama scene, then this, and it's all over the top.
So Howard, when you first heard Bridesmaids, the first movie you thought of was The Contract, and then when that was unavailable, it was Monsoon Wedding?
And I was trying to figure out, because often when someone mentions a movie, there are a couple of ways you can go. So I finally decided the best way to go was to find an art movie about a wedding.
Okay.
Sometimes it's easy to find films to match up. Sometimes I panic and I go, oh, what am I going to get? But I do think you are right. There is a universality to this film. I think everybody can identify with it in spite of the many differences between an Indian wedding and especially a Punjabi wedding, which this is, and for example, an American wedding.
The thing I like about Monsoon Wedding, and Jasper touched on this when we started discussing it, is that, yeah, Monsoon Wedding was made for $1 million. It took 30 days, and they filmed it mostly in one location, in that home. You still come away from the film feeling joyous and feeling united. Maybe not as joyous and united from Bridesmaid. You left Bridesmaid joyous because of just the farcicalness in the movie. But it just goes to show you 232 million versus 1 million, and then multiple locations versus one location. Mm-hmm. And we're still coming away with the same feelings. Mira said, I don't have all this money. We can do it in this location here with several exterior shots. Another thing about Monsoon Wedding I liked were the market scenes with all the street wires, all the activity going on.
I certainly think you make a good point that resonated with me. I love Bridesmaids. I enjoy it very much, and I feel very good at the end of it. I don't think I'm as moved as I was at the end of Monsoon Wedding.
Mm-hmm. Right, I agree. Mira, she was making movies when Sundance, for instance, was created for the very idea for indie filmmakers. Mm-hmm. She comes out of a time of filmmaking, probably looking at the American market as like what Sundance was made at the time for. It's supposed to be for unknown directors and writers to get their projects done and the low budget films. And then, of course, now we don't have that anymore. Sundance is now just a big studio place for deals to be made and big films to premiere. South by Southwest has even turned into a bigger and bigger thing. The Independent Spirit Award in LA might be one of the few even awards that really cater to true indie films. And by that, I mean, I guess anything under $3 million. Or we couldn't have picked two more contrasting budgeted films for sure. But I'm always more drawn to A Boys Don't Cry, the low budget movies like that, where less is more.
Well, this might sound like a superficial generalization, but in my lifetime, Howard and Jasper, whenever I watch a foreign film, a non-American film, and I'm going to use this word again, there's always an earthiness to it. There's always something so real about it that just resonates with me. I'm a gay boy, and the gay boy in that family was just trying to speak his own voice, to be unapologetic for who he is. Because of their family tradition, he was accepted, even though the father wanted to toughen him up, and I like that.
Yeah.
With that, here's some more information about the film. You're all right. It cost $1.2 million to make, and it made a profit of $30,787,354. So you might want to look at it this way. It made 30 times what it cost to make. I don't think Bridesmaids did that.
No.
It was nominated for the BAFTA and Golden Globe Award for Best Foreign Language Film. Before we close out, is there anything else you might want to say about The Bridesmaids or Monsoon Wedding or both films together?
Well, I would say, again, I would encourage your listeners, if they've not seen them, to see them. And if you have, take my advice, and I've learned something. Like I said, I'm going to revisit films again. And especially now, sadly, movie theaters are not open in most places. There's no excuse because we're at home with all the streaming services. I encourage people to rewatch films because you're going to see something different than you did the first time. And I'm so happy I really got to see Monsoon Wedding 18 years later. I have a whole new respect for it.
And for me, go see these films and learn about acceptance. Enough said.
Well, with that, let's start closing out. And I asked you to choose a film or two to go with your choice that might interest our audience.
I mentioned My Big Fat Greek Wedding. And then honestly, when you said Father of the Bride, I love the Nancy Meyers remakes, studio made, Steve Martin. And Nancy Meyers always had a certain look to her films too. And she always delves into these same family issues, especially around weddings.
The one I thought of immediately was Girls Trip by Kenya Barris.
Oh, yes.
The reason why is because it's of the camaraderie between women. Of course, Jada Pinkett urinates over a crowd of people. Back to my whole bathroom thing and Melissa McCarthy defecating in a sink. That is the film I want people to go see next.
That's a great choice, Ralph.
Yes, it is. These are all great choices. As for my choices, I have mentioned both of them. The first film is the 1980 Polish drama The Contract, directed by Krzysztof Zanussi. It's the story of the events leading up to a wedding in which the wife-to-be deserts her fiancé at the altar and what happens at the party afterwards. Next is the old classic, the 1950 Vincent Minnelli, Father of the Bride, in which the wedding is told from the point of view of the father, played by Oscar nominee Spencer Tracy.
Oh, such a great classic.
So what is next? What should we be looking for from you guys?
First of all, everyone, please tune in on Thursday nights, 6 o'clock Pacific. We're live on Blog Talk Radio. It's just Blog Talk Radio / Jasper Cole. This coming Thursday, we have actor-producer Mike Manning from The Bay, and also he's a new contract player on Days of Our Lives. I did a film, Kombucha Cure, in January and February, right before the pandemic, that's coming out this year. And then I did my first job during the pandemic, a new film called The Fall with Jeffrey Dean Morgan that's going to hopefully come out next year. That and back in the auditioning loop, TV is back pretty much full force, trying to maneuver during this crazy COVID times.
Do you know who's going to be on your show a week from Thursday?
A week from Thursday on the 12th, this is so exciting for me because I'm from Athens, Georgia. There's a wonderful musical talent, Calvin Smith, which we've reconnected recently, and he's in Hawaii doing a show that's going to live stream starting on the 6th. He's going to come on with Ralph and I, catch us up on his career over the last literally 35 years since we've seen each other.
And the reason why I asked for that is this won't be up in time for Thursday night.
Yeah.
And what about you, Ralph?
Well, for me, I'm happy to say, as you know, Jasper wears a lot of different hats in addition to his usual cowboy hat. I get to appear in a wonderful movie called Never and Again that stars one of his biggest clients, Denise Boutet. It's directed by Laz Rael. It's going to be coming out around Valentine's Day of next year. And then if you are aware of Chad Darnell, he is a former casting director, and he is also a showrunner now, a screenwriter, and a film director. And I had the pleasure before the pandemic of appearing in his film, which is called The Undertaker's Wife. So that is going to be coming out sometime next year. I've also worked with a wonderful showrunner and director, Alan Broca. I've worked with him before with his franchise Eating Out. He has a new franchise with Boy Culture. It was originally a film several years ago. He has made it into a television series. He invited me to participate with that. I'm happy to say that I do have 3 projects that will be coming out in 2021, in addition to being Jasper's co-host.
Great. As for me, I'll go through my usual litany. I am a screenwriter and script consultant, so I have a Howard Kastner Facebook consultation page. I have a blog called Rantings and Ravings, where I talk about issues related to movies and screenwriting. I published 2 books of short stories on Amazon, The Starving Artist and Other Stories, and The 5 Corporations and One True Religion. These are sci-fi, horror, and fantasy short stories. I've also published the 2nd edition of my screenwriting book, More Rantings and Ravings of a Screenplay Reader, and I'm an amateur photographer, and you can find those on Instagram. The previous podcast was with animator, podcaster, and film enthusiast Kurt Headley, where we discussed Jurassic Park and the Frankenstein trilogy, Frankenstein, Bride of, and Son of, films about scientists trying to play God. The next episode will be with the host of Cathode Ray Mission, Adam Perez. He's a returning guest, where we will discuss Mad Max Fury Road and A Boy and His Dog, both apocalyptic films about some very strange strangers in some very strange lands. With that, I want to thank both of you, both Jasper and Ralph, for being guests on my show.
Well, thank you, Howard. And lastly, I can just say everyone can go to jaspercole.com and follow the show and anything else that's happening. It's a one-stop shopping.
And I want to thank you, Howard, for including me in tonight's podcast. To all your listeners, let's have a safe future, onward and upward.